Welcome to the SJ Child Show, where a little bit of knowledge can turn fear into understanding. Enjoy the show. Hello, and thanks for joining the SJ Child Show. Today, I wanted to give a special shout out to the Doug Flutie Jr. Foundation for Autism. It's their 25th anniversary concert at Fenway Park in Boston, Massachusetts. You can still get your tickets, and they are going to do live stream with Channel 5 in Boston, so you can catch that there. Amazing stars on the spectrum that are going to be performing. This is a really exciting event. I wish I was closer to Boston and could attend, but for those of you who are and could be able to make it, please do so. It's going to be a fantastic event, and I look forward to seeing what comes out of it for all of these amazing advocates and stars that are looking to find their place in the community and be elevated. Enjoy. Hi, and thanks for joining the SJ Child Show today. I am talking to my neighbor from the north. He is in Montreal this morning, or whatever time it may be that you're listening to this. And I'd like to welcome him to the show. So Benji Sharer, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. Really, it's a pleasure. It's an honor to be here. I always love sharing my perspective. So.
And that works out, right? You're automatically already a sharer, right?
Indeed, yeah.
I love it. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you here today.
Okay. General question, but I'm a mental health coach. If I was going to put, I think the best way to describe what I do, and I'm starting to lean more into this phrasing, is emotional fitness trainer. So when it comes to mental health, to try and put this in the broadest terms, a lot of people, we focus on trying to analyze the past and analyze the trauma. And I don't really feel like that has been the most helpful way for me or for my clients. I know lots of people who have spent decades and decades in therapy understanding the problems, and myself as well, going to the therapist's office, talking about the past and talking about the problems. And it's very helpful and it's very important at the beginning for us to understand that there is trauma and for us to understand that there is stuff to work on. But past a certain point, understanding where the trauma and where your patterns comes from doesn't actually solve the problem. So what I do and why I'm here, or how we ended up, is I show people how to kind of bypass the intellect, how to connect to their emotions directly, and how to start recognizing the subconscious cycles that have actually been controlling their lives, and how to build the skills, the tools, and the emotional muscles necessary to start confronting their triggers head on. Because the irony about our past pain and our past trauma and all that stuff that we spend all this time analyzing is that it's actually revealing itself to us every single day. And if we're talking in the context of parents, first, I was mentioning to you even before we started recording, I love sharing this perspective with parents because it is so important. All of the little ways that we influence our children to start wearing their masks and start protecting themselves, and all of the little ways that we are getting triggered when the kids are acting up, when we don't know how to talk to them, when we don't know how to keep them safe. As parents, we get really triggered and we can't help but respond with our defense mechanisms. And the best way to raise emotionally healthy, stable, secure, and confident children is for us to work on ourselves first, so that we can stay calm and happy and peaceful when our children need our help.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself in any way. Like, that is exactly what my message is to parents too, is that it all starts with the mindset and the work on yourself to support and foster a relationship that is through trust and safety and no shame or judgment, or, and just a real sense of belonging
for your child, and what a difference that makes for children and the empowerment that it builds within them to see that. So
Yeah.
that's beautiful.
Like I
Absolutely.
said, it really is. It's the little things that, all parents know that, your children will model you in certain ways. But it really is the tiniest thing of, even when your children are just playing and expressing themselves. And if you don't have all the patience, if you don't have the patience in that moment, my parents worked a lot, for example. So even if they weren't, it doesn't need to be intense trauma. It can be the little things when your kid wants your attention, you just snap at them a little bit. Just because you don't have the patience, you didn't do anything horrible, didn't do anything wrong. But in that moment, what the child is learning is, wait a minute, I was just being playful, I was just being open. And as a response to that, I got yelled at, or I was made, what it comes down to is, I was made to feel unsafe. So when they're just being their most playful, their truest selves, even if they're doing something wrong, quote unquote. I never like that right and wrong
Right?
dichotomy.
Yeah.
But even when they're doing something that needs to be corrected, let's say, or needs to be nudged along in the right way, if you are allowing your own triggers to come up, and you respond to them with anything less than that ultimate patience and that warmness that a child needs in order to feel safe, they start building up that recognition that, wait a minute, in order to keep myself safe, I need to stuff away some element of my personality.
Yeah.
And throughout our lifetimes, as we go through that development stage, we build our entire identities and personalities around those defense mechanisms that we use to keep ourselves safe. And then by the time that we hit, our teenage years or young adult years, we don't realize that we've done that.
Yeah.
And that's why at 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, I've had clients 80 years old who for the first time in their lives are finally starting to realize, wait a minute, this was never me.
Mm.
And they're just starting to discover who they are and learning how to live that way. People who
Yeah.
have stuffed away their personalities their whole lives, people who've spent their lives overgiving in toxic relationships and abusive relationships, or simply pursuing jobs and careers that didn't feel
Mm.
right to them because somewhere along the way they learned that if I try and express my truest self, it's going to lead to pain, it's going to lead to rejection, it's going to lead to judgment.
Mm.
So in order to make sure that I don't suffer in that way, this is the person that I need to be.
Yeah. I love that. And I really like that you mentioned, it doesn't matter how old you are. The age isn't important. It's the intention at any age that you're putting into whatever it is, any projects, people, anything you're doing, that real intention. And then something else that was coming up when you were talking too is that I love to remind parents when normally 99.9% of the time when children are coming to you, they're not even seeking your attention, they're seeking connection. And when you recognize that and you put that intention in mind, when you hear them talking to you, you put your full intention into active listening to them and really understanding what they're saying, repeat back some things that they're saying to them so they feel validated. So I love that you said that, because it's not always about taking time to give them attention. It's about making a connection. And that is so important to children in their vulnerable learning stages, that they have that sense of connection, because that's the whole security. That's like the whole piece right there, is that safety.
That's what it comes down to. Without all that,
Yeah.
what you were saying, that's what it was bringing it back to me in my head. At the end of the day, like you don't necessarily have all the time in the world to give them all that attention every single moment. What it comes down to is that sense of safety.
Mm-hmm.
That especially as the parent, you're supposed to be that one person in their life, that the two people in their lives extended family as well, grandparents, all that, but the people in their lives that they are meant to be safe around.
Yeah.
And it's okay to not have all the time in the world. It's okay to have to discipline them or to teach them or to not let them just do whatever they want, because self-expression isn't just about, okay, well, let them throw pudding on the walls all day long because that's what they feel like doing. It's okay to
Right.
discipline them. They need to feel safe in that space. To know that you are still their protector, even when you are their discipliner. And, when I was talking before about not having the ultimate patience in the world, I do want to clarify that, like, I'm not trying to put that immense pressure on parents. No one expects you to be perfect, and you don't have to get every single moment of your parenting life right in order for your kids to grow up into the healthy and happy and productive and successful and fulfilled members of society they want to be. So don't put that much stress onto yourself.
Yeah.
But the point is, and something that I tell my clients all the time, it's that whatever you're struggling with in your life, whatever circumstance is coming up that you need to deal with, over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, you need to bring yourself inwards first. So whatever it is that your child is doing that needs to be dealt with or disciplined, or the attention that they need, if you are being triggered, the idea is, okay, we need to bring ourselves in first and deal with that emotion first so that we can then handle this situation in the most appropriate way. But when we try and deal with the situation first without recognizing all of the emotions that are running through us, then we bring all of those emotions and all of those defense mechanisms that we've learned throughout the years into that situation. And this can be a very challenging thing, I think, for parents when you're watching your kids in a moment of pain, for example, that, and I have to clarify first, I'm actually not a parent. So with all of these things, I do just have to say that as I move forward. But I think that one of the most difficult moments of being a parent, my perception, correct me if I'm wrong, is watching your child in pain and not knowing what to do about it.
Absolutely.
Feeling that helplessness of not being able to take that pain away. And in that moment, when you feel like you want nothing more than just to take all of the problems and all of the pain away from your children, and as a response to the ways that we've lived our lives the whole time, our only response is through our defense mechanism. So sometimes that intense love that you feel for your child will trigger you into defensiveness because you don't know how to make all of their pain go away. And that will sometimes perpetuate negative cycles that actually steers you into acting the exact opposite way that you would actually want to act.
100%. No, that was my dad to a T. Was if I ever got hurt, his response was yelling at me because it scared him and he didn't know how to control those big emotions and how to, I'm an only child. So I think that puts an extra fear in them as far as like, this is our only chance to mess this up, right? So, but I really like that you said that. And, it's important that as parents, we give ourselves grace and understanding and realize that we have situations that children don't understand, that we have to deal with adult situations. And so what if the adults say, well, Sarah, how am I supposed to, when I'm on the phone and they're just doing this and doing that, like, why should I be patient? Well, it's accountability. It's accountability. And that comes from, again, what is your intention of being a parent? Are you being a parent trying to recreate your childhood in a child? Are you trying to parent the way your parents treated you and reward or punish them the same way? Or are you looking at, as for me, this whole new journey of discovery and kind of a do-over, since I have three? I can see where what I could upgrade from the first and second ones that I learned from, and then really put into work and into action. Like, oh my gosh, I think I have something here with creating this relationship with this person whom is a complete individual and completely different from me. Yet I think as a parent, we still try to instill the same ideas, qualities, and values into each child, but we need to recognize that they all learn differently. They all, process and are going to express differently. And once we recognize that, the more understanding we can have for them and, be ourselves. So,
Yeah. I think you brought up a really fascinating point there. So you mentioned that some people, maybe it was just a hypothetical example that you were using, but you mentioned that some people would say to me, well, Sarah, why should I be patient? And as you were saying all that, like I was really thinking about that context and that scenario. So I'm imagining, a parent on the phone and the kid is, being loud or acting up and the parent needs to, settle that situation somehow. And what does it really mean to be patient? So on the one hand, patient might mean, that you need to either handle the situation first or you need to deal with them and or whatever that might mean on that end. And I think that sometimes when people ask that question of why should I be patient, what they might really be asking is why should I avoid getting angry? Why should I avoid yelling at my child in that moment? And I think that's the really interesting part because what it really all comes down to is what emotion are you bringing to the situation? We all grew up in certain ways that, our parents would use anger and disappointment and shame and judgment to get us to do what we needed to do. And I cannot possibly conceive of how anger will ever be the best way to show your children the way. Like it might be in that moment if you want your kid to do something, yes, anger is going to get them to be quiet. But it's in the long run, in terms of their development and who you want them to become, that's the pattern that we've all been stuck in. That we recognized that my behavior, my personality was met with anger. It was met with shame. It was met with judgment. And that is why we build up that mask throughout the years. So however it is that you do feel that, like as you mentioned, every child needs something different and every child learns differently and you're going to need to approach every situation differently. I think the core question is what emotion are you bringing in to the scenario? And we have to realize that when we are bringing anger or fear or guilt or shame into the scenario, it's actually because we were first being triggered. So we're playing out those same patterns that our parents gave to us. So as you were mentioning that when your dad would yell at you because you were in pain, his emotion underneath that was actually fear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fear was underneath. And since he didn't know how to handle his fear, that fear got projected as anger. And that got programmed into us. And that is how these emotions get passed down from generation to generation, how these patterns get passed down. And I genuinely believe that fear is at the core of, I mean, this is an overly generic statement, but I very much believe it to be true. Fear is at the bottom of basically everything that goes wrong in this world.
No, I agree 100%. And two things I want to share with you on that is that one, a really great quote that we came up with, and it has to do, it just wraps everything up so wonderfully all the time. And that is knowledge turns fear into understanding. And that is so true. And I relate that to my children's books to children and relating it to special needs children. So, I mean, my context may be different than somebody else may be able to take it, but in the same context, it really is so true, isn't it? Yeah. And the other thing that I just want to share with you, because I'd love if you feel free to share if you like it. But at one point, coming out of my raising my first child, she's 23. She was my stepdaughter, and I tried my hardest to do the best that I could in all of the non-parent experience that I had to just bring to the table. But unfortunately, I brought a lot of my parents' parenting to the table instead. And so when I had my second child, he was diagnosed with autism. And right away, I understood I cannot talk or, react to this child in any way the same that I could or did, unfortunately, with the first one. And it took a little bit of time, but I kind of found like a trigger game for myself. And every time I wanted to yell, I would yell, I want to yell right now. And it became so silly after a while, or not even that, it didn't even take that long for me to really understand that trigger and understand that that's when I needed to expel that energy, number one, which was happening, but I wasn't taking it out on anyone. And it wasn't projected to someone. It was what I was, like you said, what I was feeling in that moment that I wanted to yell. And that was about 10 years ago. And I don't yell. I think probably the dogs might get yelled at sometimes, but they're uncontrollable. But otherwise, like I've really, really seen the value and the patience that's come from understanding that moment. That okay, I don't want to repeat that. So
Yeah. So in those moments, one of the big things that I guide my clients through is that in those moments, there is always going to be some tension somewhere in your body. If it's that yelling thing, it's going to be maybe, tightness in your chest, you're clenching up your shoulders or the tension in your jaw. And there's, one of the core principles that I work with my clients on is there's 3 elements of your experience of reality. There's your thoughts, your emotions, and your sensations. And there's this subconscious cycle that's constantly going on between the 3 of them. So when whatever situation is happening, you catch your kids drawing on the wall, let's say, and in that moment, there's the thoughts around, oh my God, the wall, and now I have to clean it or I have to paint it, all of the like circumstances around that. But in that moment, that thought and that circumstance, you're going to tense up somewhere in your body. And that's the sensation that's going on. And that sensation is sending a message to your subconscious mind that there is danger, there is a threat, there's a problem here. And that message to your subconscious mind is going to create more fear. And fear bleeds out into anger, it bleeds out into judgment. All of those quote unquote negative emotions find their root in fear. And then that fear, because we don't understand it and we don't know how to deal with it, and the mind doesn't like the idea that there's fear coming and that it's actually coming from inside. It doesn't like that idea. It wants a problem that it can solve. The mind connects that fear to the external circumstance. So the fear creates more thoughts around this. And so again, we judge, we blame, we, start thinking about this whole situation. Those thoughts create more sensations, more of that stress response. The sensations create more emotions. The emotions create more thoughts, and around and around and around and around we go. And the cycle works in both directions. Thing is, in that moment, the only real problem was the emotions and the sensations. It's that tension that we're feeling in our body, but we're so focused on the situation. We believe that the problem is the drawing on the wall. Sure, we don't want our kids to draw on the wall, and sure, it's a situation like, okay, well, now we're going to have to clean it, we're going to have to paint it, but that's not a problem at the deepest levels of like what we consider to be a problem in life. We're so distracted with those little things.
Agreed. No, we let that happen in our house, just to say. Like, we don't see that as a problem. Please, I'm sorry, go on.
No worries. So, I mean, obviously that was just one example.
Yeah.
Whether in your house, them drawing on the walls or not, what I'm saying is there are so few scenarios in this life that in my philosophy, I would count as actual problems. So genuine physical illness, things like abusive situations, basically any situation where you are genuinely not safe is a problem. Anything else is the only real problem is the emotions. And this is why, as I said before, my guidance to clients is that over and over and over and over and over, you need to bring yourself inside first, because that's the real problem. But when we don't allow ourselves to recognize that, and we allow that core problem of the uncomfortable emotion that we don't know how to deal with bleed out into those other elements, then it creates this spiral. And we are so focused on what we consider to be this external problem that we allow those emotions to get out of control. and spiral in ways that will perpetuate that generational trauma, that will teach your kid that they are not safe, and that will create this kind of combative element between you and your children that is not going to be healthy and safe for either you or them. And then there's this whole other thing, which something that I call the anger game. And it's not just about anger. It's about all of those quote unquote negative emotions, but I call it the anger game to make it the easiest to understand, which is so, and in the context of parenting, let's say your kid does something wrong, and that's bringing up that cycle that I talked about, that emotions, thoughts, sensations, emotions, thoughts, sensations. So there's that actually that fear and that emotional distress inside of you, and that triggers all of your defense mechanisms. So your kid does something and that triggers your fear, which triggers your anger. So you get angry at the kid. And when you get angry at the kid, well, they need to start developing and using their defense mechanisms. So they will respond to your anger in a particular way, which like they get triggered. So they respond with their aggression or their defensiveness. And that aggression or defensiveness triggers you. And now you get even more aggressive, more defensive. So you come back in that way, and that triggers them, and they trigger you, and that triggers them, and they trigger you. And it builds and builds and builds and builds and builds because neither of you have really learned how to deal with that internal discomfort, which is just the emotion and the sensation. And so that builds and builds and builds between the two of you. And then each of you go out into other areas of your life, and you take that unresolved anger, and the kid will get angry at other kids in school or deal with the teachers, and you will go to your partner or to your friends or to your work, and you will take that anger, and it builds and builds and builds, and then everywhere that you go, that anger and that the anger game is just building and building and building and building and building, because no one has learned how to just look inwards and deal with that emotional discomfort that they've been carrying for a lifetime. And the secret behind the anger game is that it takes two to tango. When one person stops playing the anger game, and I mean genuinely stops playing it. I don't mean that just you choose to stop yelling. I mean you actually learn how to handle your anger so that you're not angry, you're not afraid in that moment, you're not being pushed by those more explosive emotions, let's say. When you genuinely learn how to really be calm in that moment, not because it's a tactic you're using to raise your children, but because you genuinely know that you are safe, then the whole game crumbles. It takes two people to play the anger game. And when one person is getting angry and the other person isn't, then that person is going to slowly start recognizing, wait a minute, I'm safe here. I don't need to respond with that anger. So that person is going, and especially if it's the child who's used to responding defensively, that child is going to start recognizing, wait a minute, I don't need to be defensive here. I am safe. And that's when they're going to be able to calmly express what's going on. Again, not always. Kids are volatile in and of themselves. It's not a 100% rule. Kids will sometimes cry. They will sometimes scream. They will sometimes yell. But if they know overall that they are safe because their parent isn't playing that anger game, then the whole dynamic of what used to be a very challenging and troubling situation can change. The kid won't be that perfect kid necessarily in that moment. They will still scream, they will still cry, they will still make messes sometimes. But it won't spiral out of control into that anger game that then perpetuates itself over decades in and in their lives.
Isn't that so true? And I think as a generation, I mean, this is obviously my own personal opinion, but as I look over my own family and my own generations, I know that I'm doing things differently, that my parents may have done things a little bit differently. Their parents, I don't know, I wasn't around then, but it's been taking some time for my parents to understand that the way I parent is different and the way they grandparent is, they had to take some lessons from me in how to really learn how to communicate with their grandkids. And some of them haven't, and we don't have relationships, and that's fine. That's choices that everybody makes. But the ones that do, they definitely had to learn that that style of parenting, it didn't work, especially on a nonverbal child who reacted in self-harm to any kind of explosive reactions. You learn right away to keep your together, you know. You really do. And it, maybe it's life that just kind of whips you in the face and makes you do it, but there's this sense of just overall peace for me personally, and I know my husband and our kids, that we've learned that it's taken so much time and so much work. It's not like, and I can sit here today and it looks easy because I've learned it, right? But nobody was there during the hard times when we were learning it, when we were going through the muck and the mud and it was dirty and ugly. And now I'm at the other side of it where I can say, oh my gosh, it was so much, it was worth so much going through all of that to get to this side where I can just worry more about myself, my reactions, let go of the idea of control over another human being. I think that the idea that we control our children is absurd. And I know that that comes from thinking, generations of thinking errors, if you will. But I think that what I'm now seeing in my own experience is so rewarding. And I want to share, like, this is working out, and it's on multiple levels with different children in different learning stages. So it's working because I can measure it, you know, kind of correctly. Yeah. So I love that you have this available to your community. Tell us a little bit about how we can find the information. Is it online? Do you do in-person types of things? What does that look like?
Okay. So I think the best ways for people to learn more about me and my approach, I think that's what you're asking, is firstly, I've got a book. I've got a couple of books, but the main one that I encourage people to start with is called Feelings First Shadow Work. So shadow work, you know, a lot of people have started knowing this term. It's about sort of looking at those hidden parts of yourself, starting to recognize all the patterns and all of the things, the parts of our personality that we weren't willing to look at before. But the reason why I call my approach Feelings First Shadow Work is because a lot of people still perceive shadow work to be about analyzing your past and trauma. When they say, like, look at all of the buried parts of yourself, they think they mean, oh, well, let's go find all of those repressed memories from my childhood. And that's not really what it's about. It's about recognizing these patterns, recognizing the emotions and the triggers. So it's called Feelings First Shadow Work. It's available on Amazon, all retailers, in audiobook also, narrated by me.
Love
so
that.
that's nice. And then another one of the main ways, I have an hour-long webinar that I often that I share a lot. It's called Healing Feelings First, and it gives a great overview of kind of the main shifts that we need to make in our own perspective when it comes to doing this inner healing. And people can find that on my website at benjisharercoaching.com/replay. Or if they want to just learn a little bit more about me in general, the main page, benjisharercoaching.com. Or lastly, my Facebook group is called Self-Love and Shadow Work, Modern Awakenings. So I do a lot of posts there. You can
Love
ask
that.
questions.
I'll
You can
join
share
that.
your own inner healing journey. We've got almost 10,000 members there. And it's
Congratulations.
Oh,
That's
thank you.
fantastic,
Yeah,
Benji.
it's nice.
It is so nice. I have some autism groups that I've created, and that sense of community that you can build with like-minded people and resources sharing. Oh my gosh, it's just makes my heart so feel so good, huh?
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. What are maybe 2 or 3 tips or did I say 2? I'm like 1 or 3. I don't know why my head that you could give to parents to start this journey into introspection?
Okay. So number one is, I think, to start recognizing that pattern that I was talking about in terms of thoughts, emotions, sensations. So whenever it is that you are getting triggered or you notice that your child is doing something, whenever there's a situation to deal with, as I mentioned earlier, my general guidance to people in life in any way is over and over and over and over and over, bring yourself back inside first. Notice what's going on internally and start recognizing that most of the thoughts that you're having about the scenario are, for lack of a better phrase, nonsense. The thoughts aren't real, especially when they are judgmental, when they're overly worried, when they're stressed out kind of thoughts. Recognize that somewhere in your body, there is some tension. So maybe like on the surface level, maybe you're clenching your jaw, maybe you're tightening your shoulders, or at the kind of energetic level, it's the turning feeling in the pit of your stomach or the tightness in your chest or the lump in your throat. And when you can recognize that and firstly learn how to relax your body so that like you let go of that tension in your shoulders and you learn how to like turn your attention directly to that turning feeling in the pit of your stomach. Firstly, what you're going to recognize is that you're going to recognize that the thoughts that you're having are nonsense. It's your mind trying to make sense of this discomfort. And because it doesn't know how to feel into what's going on inside, it's going to paint this picture of what's going on outside. And it's going to believe that like, oh, well, this external thing, that's the real problem. When really all it is that there's discomfort inside of you that you've spent a lifetime training yourself not to feel because you perceived it to be a threat. So when you can turn your attention directly to that tightness in your chest, that lump in your throat, or the turning feeling in the pit of your stomach, and actively allow yourself to feel it and recognize that you are not actually in danger in that moment, then you can allow that feeling to work its way through you. And what's actually happening in that moment is that turning feeling in the pit of your stomach, for example, is your body's way of trying to process something. It's trying to process stress or fear. And that is your body's natural way of dealing with something. The problem is that we've trained ourselves not to. So the example that I like to use is imagine that from a very young age, you were trained not to sweat, because sweating is impolite, or it's going to get you judged, or it's going to get you pushed away. And let's just say that you managed to train yourself not to sweat. Well, what would happen if you lived your life and you didn't sweat? You would die.
I was going to say.
You would literally boil alive from the inside out because your body needs to sweat.
Yeah.
That's how it keeps you operating at the right temperature. It's how you release certain toxins. And the exact same thing goes for your emotions. That turning feeling in the pit of your stomach, or sometimes crying or screaming or shaking. And when I say screaming, I don't mean screaming at your child. I mean like when you went through trauma and you needed to release certain energy. There are certain things that your body needs to do to process the emotions. And we've trained ourselves not to do them, and we've trained ourselves even to be afraid of them. Because in those initial moments when you were growing up, when you expressed yourself to your parents or to your teachers or authorities, you got judged and punished for it. So you came to associate that fear, that sadness, that whatever emotion needed to be expressed as a sign of danger. So you started building up certain patterns and acting in a certain way. And when you do that to your children, you're training them for the same thing, that their emotions are a threat. Because when they feel sadness, when they feel anger, sometimes even when they feel joy and happiness, it's going to lead to them getting disciplined or yelled at or made to feel unsafe. So what they really learn in that moment is, wait a minute, my emotions, my personality, my true identity, that is a threat. So I need to stuff that away. So the tip that I'm trying to give is look inside first, find where that tension is, and recognize that that is the only real problem in that moment. And when you can learn how to feel that directly and allow your body to go through that purging process, then every moment that you allow yourself to truly feel what's going on, firstly, you let go of some unresolved pain and trauma that you haven't dealt with from the past, but also you're going to start realizing that you are safe. And when you can realize that you are safe in that moment to deal with the situation and to feel that discomfort inside of you, then you're not going to need to play the anger game so much anymore. And when you stop playing the anger game, hey, your kid is going to recognize that they are safe. And then you can build this relationship with your child of mutual trust and safety, where even when they're acting out, even when you need to discipline them, you can have I mean, to the extent that at whatever age they're at, your ability to have a conversation with them, but they will know at the very least that they are safe
Yeah.
and they can learn how to listen and how to be good or how to follow your instructions without feeling like their core personality and their emotions are a threat.
Mm-hmm.
And the only other, like the second little tip that I would just give, and we kind of talked about, and it's just a generic thing, and you mentioned it yourself, is it all starts with you. If you want to be the best parent that you can be, my perspective is that it's not about learning parenting tools specifically. Yeah, maybe go and read all the parenting books and get all of that, but it's not about that specifically. It's about you working on yourself.
Yeah.
It's about you learning how to deal with your emotions and your anger and your triggers, and your children are going to be a mirror for all of that. It's going to reflect to you all of the things that you haven't healed inside yourself. So if you want to become the parent that you truly want to be, it's not going to be about learning more parenting techniques. It's going to be about you finally learning how to heal yourself. Learn your own self-love. Learn how to deal with your own triggers, how to deal with your own anger. Work on your own shadow work and emotional mastery so that you can show up into any situation that is happening. Even if you don't know exactly what to do in that moment, you will at least be able to make your child feel safe in that moment.
Love that.
And then you guys can find the right path together.
Yes, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And those are wonderful, wonderful ways to start. And it's very fits really well with our purposeful parenting series that we're fitting this into, which is the whole intent behind it is what's your purpose? And that comes from looking at yourself, your desires, your intentions, your hopes for your relationships with your child, with your other family members. So thank you so much for being here today. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope we can stay in touch. I look forward to following along, and if you have anything, events or anything else that you do in the future, let me know so that I can help support that.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks for having me. We will absolutely stay in touch. I'm not going anywhere. This is, when you finally find your life purpose. It's a beautiful thing. So
I
I'm here,
agree.
and if any of your listeners are interested in going on that journey with me, then I'm here. And it's been a pleasure sharing and speaking with you.
Thank you so, so much. And we'll definitely be in touch. And it's been so much fun. So I will let you know as soon as we are getting near the end of it, or I can't even talk now. I'll definitely air this part off at the end. But yeah, when it's getting close to airing, I'll let you know, and we'll get this all aired out and everything. I think I'm about 10 to 12 episodes out. So
okay,
I'll get in touch with you for sure. But thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Seriously, thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
It was great. I think it went really well. And I look forward to sharing it once you get it out.
Yes, absolutely. Me too. Thank you.
So you say 10 to 12 episodes. You do it weekly, bi-weekly?
I do. I'm going to